People think the Roman Empire was built by great generals, disciplined legions, and brilliant emperors. That Rome conquered the ancient world because it had the strongest army, the smartest politicians, or simply because destiny favored it. But that isn't what made Rome the greatest superpower of the ancient world. Armies don't march without food. Roads aren't built with speeches. Cities don't rise from patriotism alone. Empires are not powered by glory. They are powered by cash flow. Rome was, above everything else, an enormous economic machine. Every conquest, every law, every road, every tax collector, every merchant ship crossing the Mediterranean was a moving part inside a system designed to extract wealth from millions of people and redirect it toward the center of power. The Roman Empire didn't simply own land. It owned production, it owned trade routes, it owned taxation, it owned labor. Even victory itself became a financial asset. And once you see Rome this way, something remarkable happens. Greatest military victories begin to look like investments. Its politics become battles over revenue. Its borders resemble balance sheets. And its eventual collapse starts looking less like a military defeat and more like the bankruptcy of one of history's largest corporations. Because the real story of Rome is not how it conquered the world. It's how it paid for conquering the world. Height. During the 2nd century AD, the Roman Empire stretched across nearly 5 million square kilometers. Around 70 million people, perhaps 1/5 of the world's population at the time, lived under Roman rule. From the misty frontiers of Britain to the deserts of Egypt, from the Atlantic coast of Spain to the fertile valleys of Syria, almost everything connected to the Mediterranean economy eventually flowed through Rome. That scale created an extraordinary illusion. People often imagine that ruling such a vast empire meant possessing unlimited wealth. The reality was exactly the opposite. The larger Rome became, the more expensive it was to keep alive. Every new province meant longer roads to patrol, more soldiers to station, new governors to supervise, more grain to transport, more tax officials to employ, more infrastructure to maintain. Growth created obligations faster than it created security. Rome's leaders quickly learned that conquest only made sense if every new territory generated more income than it consumed. Expansion was never just about prestige. It was expected to pay dividends. This was the first secret behind Rome's success. Conquered province became an economic asset. When Roman legions captured Spain, they didn't simply seize land. They gained access to some of the richest silver mines in the ancient world. Those mines produced enormous quantities of precious metal, helping finance military campaigns and stabilize the Roman currency for generations. When Egypt became a Roman province after the defeat of Cleopatra and Mark Antony in 30 BC, Rome acquired something even more valuable than treasure. It acquired food. The Nile Valley was one of the most productive agricultural regions on Earth. Every year, its predictable floods produced massive grain harvests. Hundreds of thousands of tons of wheat flowed north across the Mediterranean, feeding the city of Rome itself. Control of Egypt meant control of bread, and in Rome, bread was political power. The capital eventually housed close to 1 million people, making it one of the largest cities on Earth for nearly 2,000 years. Cities of that size don't survive naturally, survive through logistics. Every day, enormous shipments of grain entered Roman ports. Warehouses stored food before distributing it across the city. Without that continuous supply chain, famine could appear within weeks. Famous phrase bread and circuses wasn't merely political theater. It was economic management. Providing subsidized grain to hundreds of thousands of citizens reduced unrest, stabilized society, and protected the ruling elite from riots. Food wasn't charity, it was insurance. This reveals another hidden truth. Roman emperors weren't simply governing people. They were managing one of history's largest supply chains. And every supply chain has costs. To pay those costs, Rome relied on taxation. Modern governments collect taxes through sophisticated financial institutions. Rome had something simpler but surprisingly effective. Every province was expected to produce revenue: land taxes, property taxes, customs duties, harbor fees, inheritance taxes, sales taxes, hearing, mining royalty, tributes from conquered territories. The Roman tax system reached into nearly every productive activity. Local elites often collected taxes on Rome's behalf, keeping a percentage while forwarding the rest to imperial authorities. This arrangement reduced administrative costs. It also encouraged corruption. Tax farming became one of the most profitable businesses in the empire. Private collectors frequently demanded more than was legally required, enriching themselves while ordinary farmers struggled to survive. The emperor might never see the abuse, but he certainly expected the money. The result was a system where incentives mattered more than intentions. Rome wasn't interested in fairness. Rome wanted predictable revenue. That's the difference between an empire and a nation. An empire doesn't necessarily ask how people are living. It asks whether taxes are arriving on time. But taxes alone couldn't explain Rome's astonishing wealth, transform the empire into an interconnected commercial network unlike anything the ancient world had ever seen. The Mediterranean Sea effectively became a Roman highway. Piracy declined dramatically after Roman naval campaigns secured major shipping routes. Merchants suddenly faced lower risks. Lower risks meant cheaper transportation. Cheaper transportation meant larger markets. And larger markets meant higher tax revenues. It was an economic flywheel. Olive oil from Spain reached Britain, glass from Syria reached Gaul, papyrus from Egypt supplied government offices across the empire, wine flowed from Italy, marble arrived from Greece. Silk traveled thousands of kilometers from China through complex trade networks before reaching wealthy Roman buyers willing to pay extraordinary prices. The empire became an enormous free trade zone protected by Roman law and Roman soldiers. For merchants, peace wasn't simply desirable, it was profitable. Historians often refer to this period as the Pax Romana, the Roman peace. But peace itself wasn't the objective. Peace was infrastructure. Stable roads, secure ports, reliable courts protected property. Enforceable contracts, these invisible systems generated wealth far more efficiently than endless warfare. The Roman road network eventually exceeded 250,000 miles, with roughly 50 miles paved to remarkable engineering standards. Many roads still influence European transportation today. People usually celebrate Roman roads as military achievements. They certainly allowed legions to move quickly. But soldiers weren't their only users. Filled those roads with wagons carrying grain, pottery, iron tools, livestock, textiles, spices, and countless other goods. Every shipment increased economic activity. Every market generated taxes. Every tax financed another road. 5 throk wasn't an expense. It was an investment. Yet beneath this impressive machine lay an uncomfortable reality. Rome depended heavily on labor it didn't pay. Slavery was not a side feature of the Roman economy. It was one of its foundations. Millions of enslaved people worked fields, mines, shops, households, construction sites, and commercial enterprises throughout the empire. Conquest continuously supplied new labor. Every successful military campaign brought prisoners who could be sold across Roman markets. To wealthy landowners, slaves represented capital assets. Buying one wasn't simply purchasing labor. It was acquiring productive capacity. Large agricultural estates known as latifundia expanded across Italy and many provinces. These estates produced wheat, olives, sand, and wine at scales impossible for small independent farmers to match. The economics were brutal. Slave labor dramatically lowered production costs. Large estates accumulated more land. Small farmers found themselves unable to compete. Many sold their farms, moved into cities, enlisted in the army simply to survive. Ironically, Rome's military victories gradually weakened the class of independent citizens that had originally formed the backbone of the Roman Republic. Success created its own structural imbalance. The wealthiest Romans became unimaginably rich. Powerful senatorial families controlled enormous estates stretching across multiple provinces. Some owned tens of thousands of slaves. Others invested in shipping fleets, mining operations, banking activities, and tax collection. Fortunes rivaled the budgets of smaller kingdoms. Economic inequality reached extraordinary levels. Luxury villas displayed imported marble, gold decorations, elaborate mosaics, heated baths, private theaters, and gardens maintained by hundreds of servants. Meanwhile, many ordinary Romans lived in crowded apartment buildings called insulae, vulnerable to fires, disease, and food shortages. The empire produced incredible prosperity, but it distributed that prosperity unevenly. And that imbalance would eventually become one of Rome's greatest vulnerabilities, because wealth concentrated at the top can finance spectacular monuments, but it cannot always finance a stable society. The machine was still generating enormous output. The question was becoming increasingly dangerous. Who was actually benefiting from it? And even more importantly, could the machine continue